Tonight we're diving into something that might hit closer to home than most would ever admit. Imagine this. Warm afternoon light sliding across hardwood floors, the soft clink of a coffee spoon against porcelain, and the gentle creak of a rocking chair that's older than your marriage. That was my life, or what I thought was mine, before everything shifted. You might believe raising children is about legacy, about love, about passing down values and recipes and stories. I did too, until I learned, painfully, that sometimes you're just raising future adults who'll one day quietly vote you out of your own life. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan hum gently in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. My name is Grace Monroe. I'm 66 years old, a retired art teacher, a grandmother, and, until recently, a living ghost in my own home. When my son Daniel and his wife Heather asked me to move in with them after my husband passed, I said yes without blinking. They had a young son, Lucas. They were trying to make ends meet in a tough housing market. I figured I could help out, watch Lucas cook, cover some of the bills with my pension. They never asked for rent. But then, I never charged them either. This was family. You don't meet a kindness when it comes to family. But what I didn't realise, what I should have realised, was that not everyone reads that rule book the same way. It started slow. Heather would make little comments at dinner. "Mom, that's too much salt. We're doing low sodium now." Then she'd turn around and order takeout for herself and Lucas extra fries. She'd pick up my old reading glasses and laugh, "These belong in a museum, Grace." I smiled through it. I told myself, keep the peace. Daniel's stuck in the middle. Don't make it worse. But peace without respect is just silence, and silence rots. Then one Thursday afternoon, I came home from my community college art class, tote bag over my shoulder, lemons and chicken in the grocery sack. I walked into my house and stopped cold. Luggage. Massive, worn travel bags stacked at the door like squatters. From the living room came loud, unfamiliar voices. Laughter. Boisterous. Rooted. Comfortable. Heather's parents. I'd met them once at the wedding. They hadn't even sent a Christmas card since, and there they were, splayed out on my sectional, talking about curtain rods. Heather emerged from the master bedroom, the bedroom I slept in, beaming like she'd won the lottery. "Oh, Grace, you're home. My parents are going to stay for a while. We figured the master has better light. It's better for their joints. I moved your things to the guest room." Guest room. That's what she called it. That cramped box where we used to stack winter coats and old holiday ornaments. She jammed my clothes, my books, my late husband's photos in there, like I was a seasonal item, packed and stored. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just walked into the guest room and closed the door. Later that evening, Heather's voice chirped through the hallway. "We'll take care of dinner tonight, Grace! Go relax!" And in that moment, with their laughter echoing off walls I'd paid for, I realised I wasn't family anymore. I was a burden they dressed up as help. I sat on the edge of the guest bed. An unfamiliar duvet crumpled beneath me. My fingers brushed a framed photo of me and my husband on our wedding day. The corner of the glass was cracked, just like something else inside me. But I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my phone and typed one number by memory. My lawyer, Tom. He picked up on the second ring. "Grace," he said, "everything all right?" "No," I replied calmly, watching the golden sunlight stretch across the carpet like it was trying to reach me. "But it will be." I wasn't angry. I was awake. I didn't need to fight to stay in that house. Because what Heather didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the deed was in my name, and that I was about to sell it. The next morning, I left the house before anyone else woke up. I didn't bother with breakfast or a note. Let them wonder. Let them assume I was sulking or off to my sister Rosa's for a break. That's what people like Heather do. They expect the backlash to be emotional and loud, something they can dismiss or spin. They never expect precision or silence. I drove straight to Tom's office, my lawyer of 15 years. We sat across his big oak desk, and I laid everything out, every detail, every insult, every smug little maneuver Heather had executed. Tom didn't interrupt. He just listened and took notes. When I finally stopped talking, he tapped his pen against the contract and said, Grace, you're still the sole title holder. If you want to sell that house, you can. I nodded, I do. The paperwork would take a few weeks to push through, especially since I wanted it clean. No loopholes, no surprises. But I could wait. I'd spent years biting my tongue. A few more weeks felt like a warm-up stretch. That night, I returned home like nothing had changed. Heather was hosting a wine night, her parents in the living room watching some game show, Daniel pacing in the kitchen while she uncorked a bottle like a woman firmly planted in her castle. She looked up and smiled with that same sugary steel in her voice. "Hey, Grace! We saved you some chicken parm." I smiled back. Lovely. But in my mind, I was picturing the listing photos, the ones the realtor would take of the house before it went on the market. The way the light filtered into the living room, how the floor-to-ceiling windows made the space feel open and airy. It was going to sell fast. Very fast. While they settled into the master bedroom like royalty, I quietly sorted through my belongings. I took only the essentials. My jewellery, my personal documents, my husband's old leather journal, and a few keepsakes. The rest? They could have it. Souvenirs from a kingdom they were about to be exiled from. Daniel noticed something was off. He caught me one night folding a few of my sweaters and placing them in a suitcase. "Mom, are you going somewhere?" I looked up, kept my voice casual. "Just staying with Rosa for a bit." He nodded slowly, scratching the back of his neck. "Heather said maybe you just needed some space." I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "She's not wrong." Daniel's not a bad man, but he's a weak one. And sometimes weak is worse, because they see what's happening, they know, but they do nothing. They let the storm roll in and hope they can outrun the rain. The day after I moved into my Oakland apartment, the one I still owned, the one no one had dared touch, I had the place deep cleaned from top to bottom. It was a dusty little 2-bedroom with old furniture and musty curtains, but the moment I stepped through the door, it felt like mine again. No one's voice echoing down the hall, no clinking wine glasses, no passive-aggressive dinner comments, just silence. Precious, unbroken silence. I opened all the windows, let the air flood in. I brewed myself a proper cup of tea, sat on the balcony with my sketchbook, and drew the afternoon sun until my fingers ached. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply. No turning, no worrying if someone would need me in the middle of the night. No Heather waking me up with her shrill laugh echoing from the living room. Just rest. A week later, I got a call from Heather. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Grace," she sang through the phone. "Just checking in. Lucas misses you. The house is so quiet without you." I could hear her fishing, testing the waters to see if I was softening. I gave her nothing. "I'm doing well," I said flatly. "Hope you are too." There was a pause. Then came the pivot. The real reason she called. "You know, since my parents moved in, things have been a little tight. Financially, with the added groceries, utilities, medical costs. I just thought, well, maybe if you could send a little something to help out." I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Heather," I said evenly, "the day you moved your parents into the master bedroom, you made it clear that I was no longer part of your household. You can't change the rules now just because you're realizing the cost." Another pause, this one longer, heavier. "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" Her voice wasn't hurt. It was angry. She'd expected guilt. Instead, she found granite. "You cut me off first," I replied. Then I hung up. From that moment on, I began to document everything, every voicemail, every text that hinted at entitlement or manipulation, every overheard comment from a neighbour who'd caught Heather bragging that one day this house will be ours. That's the thing about arrogance. It forgets that people listen. When my agent finally listed the house, I made sure it was priced just below market rate. Fast sale, clean break. By week 3, we had multiple offers, but I waited. I wanted the buyer, the one who'd see the place for what it was worth and take it off my hands with no drama. When the offer came in, cash, full price, no contingencies, I said yes. That was also the day I made my final call to Tom. "Let's go ahead with removing Daniel and Heather from the occupant record," I said. "Ready to drop the hammer?" "No, I'm just ready to move on." I didn't show up at the Berkeley house in person. That wasn't necessary anymore. My presence wasn't required to make a statement. The keys were handed off at the property management office with zero fanfare. Just paperwork, signatures, and the subtle finality of bureaucracy doing what emotion never could: cut ties clean. Meanwhile, Daniel and Heather were still living like they had all the time in the world. Heather redecorated again, this time adding ugly wicker baskets to the living room and hanging a sign in the hallway that said, "Love makes a house a home." I almost laughed when I saw it in the walkthrough photos my realtor sent. Love? More like leverage. The buyers scheduled their first official visit on a Saturday. A young couple, just married, full of Pinterest boards and down payment dreams. They were perfect. The realtor set everything up. All I had to do was sign off on the showing. Heather had no idea. From what I heard, she was lounging on the sectional in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, scrolling through her phone when the doorbell rang. The real estate agent, clipboard in hand and professional smile fixed tight, stepped inside with the couple right behind her. Heather blinked. "Can I help you?" The agent didn't miss a beat. "Hi, we're here for the showing. Grace Monroe's property. You must be Heather." There was a beat of silence. Then panic. Heather stammered, "What showing? This is our home." The agent calmly held up the paperwork. "Actually, Miss Monroe is the sole owner. We're authorized to show the property. You're not on the title." I wish I could have seen her face. Word travelled fast, though. One of the neighbours, bless her nosy heart, filmed a bit of the exchange from her upstairs balcony and sent it to me. Heather's face twisted in a cocktail of confusion and horror, mouth opening and closing like she was underwater. The young couple looked around nervously, unsure if this was some kind of social experiment. The clip ended with Heather whipping out her phone and barking, "I'm calling my husband!" Daniel, sweet, overwhelmed Daniel, apparently arrived 10 minutes later, looking like he'd run 3 red lights and a stop sign. But it was too late. The house was no longer their fortress. The locks had been metaphorically, soon to be literally, changed. That night, I got the call. "Mom." Daniel's voice was shaky, hushed. Are you really selling the house?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said, "You knew whose name was on the deed." He exhaled, a sound so thin it was barely air. "Heather's losing it. She's crying, screaming. Why didn't you tell us?" I wanted to scream, "Why didn't you tell me your wife was moving her parents into my bedroom?" But I didn't, because the past was already ash. "I didn't tell you," I said instead, "because I didn't need your permission." That silence again. We don't have anywhere to go," he whispered. I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window of my Oakland apartment. The sun was setting in gold bands across the floor. I stirred the sugar into my tea and said softly, "Then maybe it's time you learn how to build something on your own." 2 days later, my realtor called. "Grace, we've got an offer, well above asking. Cash, no strings. They want to close in 10 days. "Do it," I said. And just like that, it was nearly over. Heather tried every trick in the book. She posted a long, melodramatic rant on Facebook about how family should stick together and how she had given everything for this home. There were emojis, there were tears, there were likes from mutuals who didn't know the half of it. But facts don't weep. Facts sign closing papers. I let the realtor handle it from here. She served the notice, arranged for the moving crew, even scheduled a lock change for 5:01 p.m. the day of handoff. Clean, surgical. Heather called me again the night before the final move out. Her voice was hoarse, the facade finally cracking. "Grace, please, for Lucas. He doesn't understand what's happening. He's scared. Just let him stay at least." I closed my eyes and tried to summon anger, but it didn't come. Only resolve. "You used my grandson as a bargaining chip," I said quietly. "Don't you dare use him now as a shield." Then I hung up. I spent that night rereading my husband's journal. There were entries about our early years, scraping together savings, fixing that Berkeley house up by hand. There was a line he wrote once, scribbled between grocery lists and doodles. "A house is only a home when the people inside honour each other." He would have been proud of me, not for selling it, but for remembering what it meant to be honoured. The house sold on a Wednesday. Clean transaction. Title transferred. Funds wired, Roni. No fanfare. Just a final click of a digital signature. And the house that once tried to suffocate me with unspoken obligations and mismatched throw pillows no longer had my name attached to its pain. I didn't attend the final walkthrough. My realtor did that. clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, looking like a shark in heels, which is exactly what I needed. She texted me when it was done. "They're out. Buyers are in. Congratulations, Grace." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, not sweet but something sharp and dry, and sat out on my tiny balcony in Oakland. The air was cooler than I remembered. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe I was just no longer breathing recycled guilt. I hadn't told many people what happened. Not because I was ashamed, but because explaining it felt like explaining why you left a room that was on fire. People always ask why you didn't put it out, not realizing you didn't start the blaze. And that day in the guest room, staring at my life packed into a pile of wrinkled laundry and resentment, that was when I realized I'd spent years choking on smoke. Daniel sent one last text the morning after the sale finalized. "Mom, we're officially out. I don't know what to say. Heather's furious. Lucas is confused. I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a while. I didn't reply. What was there to say that hadn't already been written in deeds and silence? A few days passed. Then came the ripple effects. Heather, predictably, spiraled. First came the social media campaign, cryptic quotes about betrayal, photos of empty moving boxes, captions like, "Some people will hurt you, pretend it's your fault, and still expect you to help them pack." I ignored them. So did most people. Drama fatigue is real. Then came the family calls. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Clara from Arizona. Even a niece who'd once asked to borrow money for nursing school and then posted pictures from a Cancun beach. They all had the same tone, concern laced with quiet judgment. "Grace, we heard you sold the house. Are you okay?" What happened with Daniel and Heather? They're really struggling, you know. "Lucas misses you. He's just a child." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't offer explanations. I simply said, "I'm fine." And this was something that had to happen. Those who cared understood without needing the full story. The others, well, let them gossip. If they were going to craft a version of me from shadows, I'd rather it be the version that finally stood up and said no. Heather tried one more time. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, standing at my door with oversized sunglasses and a face painted in apologies. Her voice was thin, trembling, rehearsed. "Grace, I know we had our differences, but Lucas misses you. We all do. Maybe we could talk?" I didn't invite her in. I didn't lean against the door frame or soften my eyes. I just stood solid and still, like the tree outside my window that had weathered too many storms to fall for light drizzle. "You made your choices," I said. She blinked fast. "But he's just a little boy. He doesn't understand." I nodded. "That's true, and it's your job to explain it to him, not mine to fix it." She sniffled. A tear, or the idea of one, slid down her cheek. "You're really not going to forgive us?" she whispered. I tilted my head. "Heather, forgiveness isn't the same as giving you back the keys." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. No words, just silence. Then a bitter little huff as she turned on her heel and walked away. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I stepped back inside, locked the door, and made myself a grilled cheese. Tomato soup, a simple comfort meal. The kind nobody asked me to cook. The kind I made for myself, not to feed anyone's expectations. That night I slept better than I had in years. No creaking floors above me, no passive-aggressive coughing from a hallway, no closed bedroom door holding behind it the ghosts of my sacrifice. Just peace. And the quiet realization I didn't need to burn the house down to save myself. I just had to walk away and close the door behind me. I didn't expect the fallout to be so quiet. I thought maybe there'd be some final explosion, a dramatic phone call, perhaps a late-night knock at the door, but all I got was stillness, the kind that made you realize the storm had never really been outside. It had been inside you all along. 2 weeks after the house sale closed, my realtor forwarded me a voicemail left on her office line. It was Heather. Her voice was brittle, cracking around the edges, but still trying to hold that familiar superiority. "I just want to make sure Grace understands what she's done. Selling the house like that, it was cruel. We didn't deserve to be treated like squatters. And Lucas misses her." Then a pause. "Tell her, if she ever wants to talk, she knows where to find us." I deleted the message. Maybe I would talk one day, but on my time. Not theirs. That day, I decided to take a small trip. Nothing fancy, just a long train ride up the coast to a sleepy beach town I hadn't visited since my husband and I were newlyweds. Back then, we'd held hands in the sand and made grand promises about the future, some of which had come true, and some of which time had quietly rewritten. I packed lightly, a few clothes, my sketch pad, and a book of poetry I always meant to finish. When I boarded the train, I felt like a teenager again, off on an adventure no one else knew about. The train rocked gently, the ocean glinting outside the window like scattered coins. I sipped coffee from a paper cup and doodled nonsense in the margins of my sketch pad, half flowers, half memories. There was a couple across the aisle, maybe in their 40s. The woman had a laugh like chimes, and the man kept glancing at her like she was a sunrise. I didn't envy them. I just appreciated them. Proof that not all partnerships end in battlefields. In the town, I stayed in a tiny rental cottage painted turquoise with seashells glued to the fence. It was tacky and perfect. I walked the boardwalk, bought fudge I didn't need, and sat with my feet in the sand watching the tide carry away bits of broken shell and seaweed, like the ocean had its own gentle way of cleaning up. That night, in the little cottage with its humming refrigerator and lopsided lampshade, I wrote something in my journal. I'm not grieving a house anymore. I'm grieving the part of myself that kept trying to make everyone else comfortable at the cost of my own oxygen. That woman deserved love, but also a little tough love from herself. Back home in Oakland, the seasons began to shift. The breeze carried more bite, and the trees along my street started to brown at the edges. One morning, I opened my email to find a message from Daniel. No subject line, just 2 words in the body. Thank you. I stared at it for a long time. No punctuation, no explanation. Maybe he meant for raising him. Maybe he meant for not bailing them out again. Maybe, just maybe, he meant for finally teaching him what boundaries look like. I didn't reply. Sometimes a door doesn't need to be slammed shut. It just needs to remain closed. But that didn't mean my heart had turned to stone. A few days later, I mailed a birthday card to Lucas. No cash inside. No promises. Just a small hand-painted card with a cartoon duck and the words, "Thinking of you always. Love, Grandma G." He didn't choose this, and I wouldn't use him as leverage in a war he never started. Let Heather twist in the wind. Let Daniel stew in the decisions he refused to make. My life had finally bloomed without their shadows cast over it. One Saturday I went to an estate sale in the neighborhood, some elderly couple downsizing to Florida. I wandered through their home, touched by the fingerprints of a long life well lived. I found a wooden music box for $5, still playing a soft twinkling tune. When I turned the key and heard it play, I smiled, not because it was valuable, but because for the first time in years, the only thing echoing through my home was music. The funny thing about freedom is that at first it feels like forgetting to wear a coat in the cold, like you left something behind and your body keeps reaching for it. But over time, the air stops biting, the weight lifts, and you realize you weren't cold. You were just suffocating under layers that didn't belong to you anymore. That's how the days started to feel, lighter. I began painting again, something I hadn't done in years. Not for work. Not for Lucas's school projects. Just for me. Oil on canvas, rough brush strokes, messy palettes. I wasn't making art. I was making space inside myself. One morning, I walked to the lake with a thermos of coffee and my sketch pad tucked under my arm. The ducks were louder than usual, quacking like gossiping old men, and I laughed out loud, startling an elderly jogger who smiled at me like I was slightly unhinged. I didn't mind. That kind of laughter had been gone for a long time. At the cafe nearby, the barista with purple hair and an eyebrow ring always gave me extra foam. "You look like someone who deserves a soft day," she once said. I tipped her well. I started noticing the little joys again, the slant of afternoon light against my living room wall, the scent of jasmine from the neighbour's overgrown bush, the way my old cat stretched out like a queen across the windowsill, claiming sunlight like it was rent. I wasn't just healing. I was thriving. Of course, not everything disappeared with the sale. Daniel tried again. This time it was a handwritten letter. I could tell he'd laboured over it. His handwriting was careful, his words full of hesitation. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive us. I just want you to know I've started to understand. Heather and I aren't doing well. We're seeing a counsellor. She's trying, I think. And I've started budgeting, really budgeting, for the first time in my life. I know I messed up. You didn't deserve what happened. I'm sorry. I hope one day we can talk again. Just us. No pressure. Love, Daniel. I read it twice. Then again, the anger that used to rise up like a firestorm when I thought about him, it didn't come. What replaced it was something quieter. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the space where forgiveness could someday live. Still, I didn't write back because sometimes silence isn't punishment. It's peace. And I wasn't ready to give mine away. Instead, I tucked the letter in a drawer, not to forget, but to remember, to remind myself that I could hold space for someone's growth without surrendering mine. A week later, Lillian, my new friend from the Widows group, invited me to her book club. It was mostly women in their 60s and 70s who had stories etched into their skin like tree rings. Decades of marriages, heartbreaks, love affairs, and survival. They read mystery novels and drank boxed wine and cackled like teenagers when someone made a saucy joke. I fit right in. They didn't ask about my past, not right away. But one night, as we passed around brownies and someone complained about her daughter-in-law's obsession with aesthetic kitchen gadgets, I offered a small smile and said, "Mine once redecorated my soul out of my own bedroom." They laughed. But then they looked at me, really looked, and one of them, Shirley, with her candy pink lipstick, reached out and said, "But you're here now, honey, and that counts." Yes, that counts. Another day I got a call from my lawyer, Tom. "We finalised everything," he said. "The trust is secure. Healthcare, housing, travel, all covered. You've done well, Grace." I knew that already, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like closing the last page of a long, chaotic chapter. I'd protected myself, not just from Heather, but from the idea that I had to accept love in any form it came, even when it was twisted. One evening, while sipping tea on my balcony, I looked out at the city, quiet and humming, and whispered, "I choose me now. No fanfare, no witnesses, just truth." And let me tell you, that's the most powerful declaration you'll ever make. The music box found its place on my bedside table, next to my husband's photograph, the one where he's holding our infant son with the sort of tenderness only new fathers know. I wound the box each evening before bed, letting its delicate chimes soften the walls like a lullaby meant only for me. The days grew shorter, evenings slipping in quietly like old friends. I found myself settling into small, satisfying rituals. Morning tea steeped slowly while I read the paper. A mid-afternoon walk, always the same route past the bakery with the crooked sign and the thrift store that never updated its window display. And every Friday, oil painting class at the community college. My hands, once used to stirring soup and folding laundry for a house that never felt like mine, now danced with brushes, coaxing colour onto canvas. My instructor, a delightfully blunt woman named Fran, once looked over my shoulder and said, "Grace, your brushstrokes look like someone who just set a boundary and means it." I laughed. She wasn't wrong, but healing isn't always graceful. Sometimes it's awkward silence. Sometimes it's hearing your phone buzz and letting it ring out, because you already know it's not a conversation. It's a trap. That's what happened one chilly Wednesday evening. A call from Daniel. Voicemail. "Mom, it's Lucas's birthday this weekend. He asked if you'd come. We're having a little party at the house. I mean, Heather's aunt's place. We're staying there for now. He keeps asking about you." He added, softer, "You don't have to bring anything. Just come." I didn't play the message again. I just sat in the dark, letting it settle over me like dusk. A part of me ached. A tug, subtle but insistent. The same part that once sat through PTA meetings and school plays, that cut the crusts off Daniel's sandwiches and read bedtime stories twice because once more always meant the world. But the ache didn't pull me back. It reminded me why I had to stay forward. Later that night, I took out a blank card and painted a picture of a dragon, bright green, a little goofy, breathing a puff of glittery smoke. On the inside I wrote, "Happy birthday, Lucas. You're braver than any knight and cooler than any wizard. I'm cheering for you always. Love, Grandma G." I mailed it the next morning. No RSVP, no explanation, no guilt. Because the truth was I didn't owe them that. Daniel and Heather made a home that had no room for me, not physically, not emotionally, and now they were asking me to visit the aftermath as if I hadn't been burned by the fire they lit. But Lucas, he was different. He was innocent. So I showed up in the only way I could, quietly, lovingly, from a distance. That Friday, I met Lillian, my walking partner, for coffee. She had just finished knitting a hideous but heartfelt scarf for her neighbour and wanted to celebrate with cinnamon rolls. We sat by the window as it rained outside, soft and grey. "I heard your daughter-in-law made a scene at the grocery store," Lillian said, raising an eyebrow. "Apparently she yelled at the self-checkout machine." I nearly snorted into my mug. "She always did hate consequences," I replied. And reality," Lillian added with a wink. We laughed, the kind of warm, belly-deep laugh that only comes when you know you're no longer holding your breath around someone. I didn't talk about the voicemail or Lucas's birthday. I didn't need to. Lillian already knew the rhythm of my story. That weekend, I stayed home. I painted. I played the music box. I watched an old black and white movie and fell asleep with a bowl of popcorn in my lap, and the world didn't end. In fact, it grew quieter. Safer. Like a house with the locks finally changed. That Sunday morning, as I watered the balcony orchid, thriving again finally, I whispered to the breeze, "This is what it means to reclaim peace." I didn't know what closure felt like until I saw the email. It came on a quiet Tuesday morning, while I was sorting through my inbox between sips of green tea. The subject line read, "Escrow closed. Confirmation of transfer of property, Berkeley residence." I stared at it for a moment, watching the cursor blink like it was waiting for permission. With one click, it was official. The house, the one they thought they'd inherit without a second thought, was no longer theirs to destroy. It now belonged to a young couple with their first baby on the way and dreams of repainting the kitchen yellow, a family who wanted to build something, not just take it. And me? I didn't feel triumphant. Just released. There's a strange peace in finally being forgotten by people who only remembered you for what you could provide. 2 days later, Tom stopped by with a neat folder of documents and a small leather-bound notebook. He'd prepared everything, the sale, the legal handoffs, and even the updated trust documentation. "Everything is squared away," he said, placing the notebook into my hands. "You've got full control, and backup contingencies too, just in case you ever need someone to carry out your wishes." I flipped through the pages slowly. Medical directives, estate breakdowns, donation clauses. There, in neat type, was the phrase I never thought I'd commit to. No inheritance to Daniel Monroe. Just reading it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I don't hate my son, I need to say that clearly. I love him in the way you love something that once made you proud, even if now it doesn't resemble what you nurtured. But love isn't blind. And it isn't supposed to cost your self-respect. Later that week, I went to the lake again. Lillian and I brought sandwiches and old photo albums. She showed me pictures of her daughter's wedding. I showed her one of Daniel when he was 10, missing his front teeth and holding a trophy for second-place science fair. "He was brilliant," I said, tapping the photo. "He built a homemade water purifier from soda bottles and charcoal." She smiled gently. "And now?" I shrugged. "Now he's married to a woman who thinks empathy is an inconvenience." She didn't say anything. She just reached into her bag, pulled out a cookie and offered it like a quiet truce with the past. The next afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. A photo, Lucas, dressed as a dragon for Halloween, grinning wildly holding a plastic pumpkin bucket, teeth stained blue from some absurd candy. The caption read, "Guess what, Grandma? I'm your brave dragon today." No name. No sender ID. Just that. I sat on my porch that evening with the photo in my hand, rocking gently as the sun went down. That simple picture did something no apology from Heather or stammer from Daniel ever could. It reminded me why I had done it all, why I had chosen peace over proximity, freedom over facade, not to hurt them, not to punish, but to teach maybe not them but someone, that love with no backbone is just fear in disguise. Lucas might not understand it now, but one day I hope he'll look back and realise his grandmother didn't vanish. She reclaimed herself, and if he ever knocks on my door years from now, older and curious, I'll be right here. With tea, with stories, and with a dragon costume I plan to keep in the hall closet just in case. Because forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. It just requires that you never surrender the parts of yourself you fought so hard to recover. It's funny how fast the world forgets what they never truly cared for. After the final documents were signed, and the moving truck pulled away from the Berkeley house, the stream of gossip dried up just as quickly as it had bubbled to life. The neighbours who once peeked behind curtains and messaged me breathless updates fell silent. No more videos of Heather shouting in the driveway. No more vague texts from Daniel asking if I was doing okay. They had nothing left to talk about. I had made sure of that. I kept things simple, spent mornings walking the quiet streets of Oakland, afternoons volunteering at the local library, and evenings painting the same orchid over and over again. Not because I couldn't think of anything new, but because every stroke reminded me that even things we once gave up on could bloom again. Sometimes I got calls, not from Daniel, but from cousins, old friends, people from long ago who'd heard something happened and were just now catching up. They always asked the same thing, wrapped in different words. Don't you miss your family? And I'd always answer the same way. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped financing my mistreatment. What people never realize is that walking away isn't always about anger. It's about exhaustion. It's about counting the times you were quiet so others could stay comfortable, and realizing your silence only bought their cruelty more room to grow. One Sunday morning, Rosa came over with a basket of cinnamon buns and a newspaper tucked under her arm. I heard they're renting a basement apartment in Fremont now, she said casually, sipping her coffee. No washer, no parking, 3rd floor. I didn't say anything, just nodded and reached for the crossword puzzle. Later that day, while trimming the jasmine near the front fence, I saw a little boy run past with a toy sword. He looked just like Lucas from behind. Same floppy hair, same bounce in his step. For a moment, I felt that ache again. The one that grabs your chest, squeezes the ribs, reminds you that biology and belonging are not the same thing. But then I turned and looked at my home. The little ceramic chimes hanging from the porch. The rocking chair my husband had painted blue the summer after we retired. The lemon tree growing stubbornly against the fence, sour but alive, and I thought, this is love too. Not the loud, complicated kind that shouts across tables and slams doors, but the quiet, reliable kind that waters plants and folds blankets and doesn't ask for anything it doesn't offer in return. A few weeks later, the phone rang again. Not Daniel, not Heather, Lucas. His voice was small, uncertain, but unmistakable. "Grandma G," he whispered. "Can I come see you sometime?" My heart did a strange thing, shrank and swelled all at once. "Of course," I said, my voice a whisper too. "Whenever you want." And that's how we began again. Not with fanfare, not with dramatic reconciliations or public apologies, but with a child's voice and an old woman's promise. The next Saturday, he arrived with a backpack, a colouring book, and a plastic bag of gummy worms. Heather didn't come. Daniel sat in the car but didn't step out. I didn't invite them in. I didn't need to. Lucas ran through the front door like he'd always lived there, already asking if we could paint something with fire and dragons and a moon. That night, we sat on the floor, brushes in hand, colours everywhere. When he fell asleep, curled up next to the space heater, I covered him with a knit blanket, turned off the lights and watched the moonlight stretch across the living room tiles like it was blessing us both. I knew then that healing wouldn't come in a single moment. It would come like this, slow and soft and a little messy. But it would come, and for the first time in a long, long while, I was ready. The morning after Lucas stayed over, I woke before the sun. That strange internal clock older women develop after a lifetime of early risings. School, parenting, caretaking, still ticked on. The house was quiet except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan and Lucas's even breathing from the next room. I padded to the kitchen, made a pot of black tea, and stepped onto the balcony just as the sky blushed orange. The orchid I'd rescued was flowering again. A single bloom had opened overnight, delicate pale lavender, full of life. I smiled. Sometimes the smallest things feel like proof that you're not invisible anymore. Lucas woke late, blinking against the light, his curls a mess of dreams and pillow creases. "Did we finish the dragon painting?" he asked immediately, rubbing his eyes. "Not yet," I said. "The dragon's asleep. He needs breakfast first." He giggled, already reaching for his markers. We spent the weekend like that, painting, baking, visiting the Sunday market, where Lucas proudly held my hand and asked for 2 scoops of mango sorbet. A woman from my community yoga group waved at me and asked, "Is that your grandson?" And when I said yes, she smiled and said, "He looks happy." He was. And so was I. Daniel didn't call. Heather didn't text. And that silence, that was its own kind of music. I didn't crave an apology anymore. What I had now wasn't about them. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been buried under decades of giving, yielding, and being overlooked. That Monday morning, after Lucas left, I walked through the house alone. Not lonely, just alone. I passed the sunroom, now filled with my husband's old books and new sketches. I ran my fingers over the wooden banister he once polished, the corner where he always left his umbrella. I felt him there, not like a ghost, but like a whisper of memory, just threaded through the space. I'd made peace with it all, even with the parts that still stung. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Official looking, from Heather. Inside was a polite, coldly worded mediation request. They were contesting the sale of the house, citing unfair treatment and verbal agreements. I read it once, then calmly slid it into a folder labelled Future Firewood. Later, I handed it to Tom, who laughed under his breath and said, "They really don't know who they're dealing with." I didn't retaliate, didn't write back, just let Tom handle it with the same clarity and precision that had brought me this far, because revenge wasn't necessary. They were already living in the ruins of their own choices. The final legal slap came a month later, when the new homeowners sent a polite note via Tom, thanking me for the seamless transition and confirming the property was now fully theirs. A clean break. No strings, no ghosts. That night I made myself a glass of red wine, pulled out my favourite blanket and opened my journal. I wrote something simple. Today I closed a door no one will ever force me to reopen. Weeks passed, seasons shifted, the world kept spinning. I planted tomatoes on the balcony, took up piano with a retired jazz musician named Connie who smelled like peppermint and always wore red lipstick. I laughed more, slept deeper. And one evening, while sipping tea and listening to Billie Holiday hum through the speakers, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't look tired. I looked free. So here we are, back where we began. But everything is different now. The journey you just listened to wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about a house. It was about waking up, about realizing that sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us most, not with fists or shouting, but with small, subtle betrayals that pile up until you can't breathe anymore. It was about finding your voice after years of being polite, about choosing stillness over chaos, peace over obligation. Grace Munro didn't storm out of her home in a rage. She walked out with dignity, a packed suitcase and a plan. And she didn't just reclaim her space, she reclaimed herself. In a world where so many mothers, daughters, grandmothers are expected to give without question, Grace gave one final powerful gift to herself. And in doing so, she left behind a blueprint for setting boundaries, for building a second life, for knowing when to stop shrinking to fit into someone else's story. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in Grace. Maybe you've stood in the corner of a home you built, wondering when you became invisible. But maybe, just maybe, now you know, you're not alone and it's not too late to take the keys back. So go ahead, turn off the light. Let this story settle into your bones like a lullaby made of steel. You are not a guest in your own life. And tomorrow is yours again.